Hi, Kathy. Good to see you. So let's start with a welcome.
Hi
Welcome.
there. Good to see everyone. Sorry, I was eating. Um, didn't speak right away. Hello, everyone.
Hello. Yeah, unfortunately we can't I guess see you and also hear you well. So I think you're gonna have to stay as you are. Anyhow, welcome to everybody. So grateful that you guys have joined us. And again, oh, there's Reggie. Hey, Reggie. Can't hear you, Reggie.
They got me down as Candace Elder, but I
Yeah.
guess
Yeah, Mariano says if you go up to where the mute button is and you hit those three dots, you can go ahead and rename yourself.
okay. Thank you.
Something I just learned today. In any case, we as we already said, we can use all the Candace elders we can get.
Yeah,
Anyhow, thanks for joining us, Reggie.
yeah.
Let's go ahead and get started. First of all, welcome, and we're just so appreciative of all you to make it.
And that.
So I wanted to just make sure you guys understand. We really appreciate you guys taking the time on a Saturday afternoon to join us in this work. And I want to put out a big thank you and shout out to Rania, who has had a great deal to do with this coming off, particularly in terms of the slideshow. Again, there was no way I was going to be able to put it together without her help. So really appreciate Rania and her help and her expertise, as well as Aaron, the chief of staff for the CPRA. Rania is the chief of staff for the commission. So she's just been a huge help to me so far, and I know she will be to the rest of the commission. One of the things that was suggested by Commissioner Harbin Forte is an approval of the minutes. And I told her, I said, well, I hadn't really thought of it as being that formalized, but I don't know if I see any real downside to it. So real quickly, is there the minutes that Director Alden put together? Is there anything that should be added or deleted? Any mistakes on there? Shall we just go ahead and approve it? If not, but I do think it's a good idea to have a written record of our meetings, not to mention that it's being recorded. But is there any anything that should be added to the minutes or deleted or corrected? If not, then we'll unless there's any objections, we'll just say that this set of minutes that was put out by John Alden is our official record, and it's been approved, reviewed and approved. So now to the highlight, the slideshow. So I want, if you would, I'd like to have Rania go ahead and bring that up and see what y'all think. Did everybody see that?
Yeah, I can.
Great. Okay. So it did some work on getting this put together, and I'm anxious to hear not that long, so we should be able to progress pretty quickly. So let's go to the second slide. So history of policing in the U.S. This is obviously colonial times. Many unjust laws have been passed in the U.S. since it was a colony, and not the first of which were the slave codes legalizing the, quote, ownership and brutalization of human beings by wealthy slaveholders. Next slide. In the South, slave patrols were an early form of American policing. And let me just move something here. In the North, that was supported by Congress passing the Fugitive Slave Act in 1793, allowing runaway slaves to be returned to their, quote, owners. And the role of police in the U.S. historically has been to enforce the law, however unjust, while maintaining white supremacy and protecting the interests of the rich and powerful who determine the law. Next slide. Throughout the mid 1800s, police departments sprang up in major cities in response to a population boom, primarily of poor European immigrants, in addition to urbanization issues and civil unrest. Much of the civil unrest was due to poor living conditions, unfair labor practices, unemployment, and the unfair treatment by police of immigrants. Police brutally controlled immigrants to protect the financial interests of the wealthy in the same way that slave patrols protected the financial interests of slaveholders. Next slide.
I'm so sorry, technical issues.
Okay. There we go. Okay. Municipal police, by and large, were corrupt and brutal. This is the Chinatown Squad, a notoriously harsh police unit in San Francisco in 1905. There was some huge brutalizations of the Chinese in San Francisco, similar with what we saw in Oklahoma. They were effectively delegated vigilantes, entrusted with the power to use overwhelming force against the quote, dangerous classes as a means of deterring criminality. Defining social control as crime control was accomplished by raising the specter of these dangerous classes. And this is important because we could see this later we could see this later, the depiction used by Ronald Reagan against poor people and the quote welfare queens, and by Bush against quote violent black criminals in the Willie Horton ads, and by Trump portraying Mexicans and immigrants as rapists and murderers, thereby creating this dangerous class of people. Next slide.
Commissioner Dorado, I
Yes.
see that Kathy Leonard has a hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Wanted to make sure that Kathy, you
Kathy, go ahead.
comment or question.
Thank you. I was just going to say that I couldn't see everything that you were reading. It was like the screen was truncated or something.
Yeah, there's the text on the screen, Kathy, and then my personal notes,
Okay.
commentary on that particular screen.
Okay, thank you.
All righty. Here we have the end of the Civil War brought Reconstruction and the transformation of slave patrols into local police departments. A violent divide and conquer campaign by informally state-sanctioned paramilitary groups like the Ku Klux Klan set about to terrorize blacks and whites to again protect the interests of the rich and powerful. What is often overlooked is the application of anti-immigrant laws perfected in the North to suppress and control African Americans in the South. White Southern reactionaries studied and borrowed anti-democratic tactics from states such as Massachusetts, New Jersey, and Rhode Island, including new registration requirements and voter roll purges, etc. Does that sound familiar? Next slide. At the dawn of the 20th century, police were, at least de facto, acting as the enforcement arm of organized crime and the dominant political parties of American cities, as well as strikebreakers for the economic elite. Obviously, there was a great deal of corruption, and investigative commissions into this corruption inevitably found widespread involvement in gambling, prostitution, drugs, extortion, bribery, and later documented instances of excessive force and racism. Next slide. Early policing reforms were led by this gentleman, August Vollmer, who argued that police should take a more active role in the community, but this was replaced by the centralized and professional model pioneered by the FBI and our friend J. Edgar Hoover. Instead of broadening police responsibilities per Vollmer, the professional model narrowed policing down to a military-style command and control structure. This effectively severed the ties between police and the neighborhoods, especially given motorized prevention controls, quote, incident-driven rapid response to calls for service, and reactive criminal investigation. Next slide. Community policing has been evolving slowly since the civil rights movement of the 1960s exposed the weaknesses of the professional policing model. Widespread riots and protests against racial injustices brought government attention to these sources of racial discrimination and tension, including the police. However, early attempts at decentralization to be more responsive to neighborhood problems were strongly opposed by police managers and eventually abandoned. Next slide. In 1978, Flint, Michigan successfully reinstituted a citywide program of foot patrols, assigning officers to walking beats. Meanwhile, studies showed that the crime-solving ability of the police could be enhanced through programs that fostered greater cooperation between the police and community. In Flint, Foot Patrol was part of a much broader program designed to involve officers in successful community problem solving. In Newark, New Jersey, foot patrols focused only on increased visibility, and that did not appear to reduce crime at all. Next slide. Through the 1980s, interest in problem solving, foot patrols, and the relationship between the police and the community continued to grow. In 1986, problem and community-oriented initiatives were implemented in Maryland and Virginia, and scholars continued to examine community policing more critically to design more rigorous methodological studies that could evaluate the effect of community policing more clearly. Next slide. By the 1990s, community policing had become a powerful national movement that saw police departments shifting their attention toward implementing community policing reforms. Okay, that's the next slide. On June 11, 1996, Oakland adopted Resolution 72727, establishing community policing as the public safety policy of the city of Oakland. The policy established 57 distinct beats in Oakland, consisting of 5,000 to 7,000 people each, and each beat was to have a neighborhood crime prevention council with an assigned problem-solving officer and non-sworn neighborhood services coordinator. Now, they called the assigned officers problem-solving back then, and then changed it later to community resource officers. So next slide. On November 4th, 1997, Resolution 727 was amended to create the Community Policing Advisory Board. The CPAB is an advocate for community policing, helping to bring block and neighborhood groups together as a citywide voice for community policing. The CPAB has the authority to certify NCPCs in compliance with Resolution 72727 and decertify those out of compliance. And that's section 5.5 of the resolution. And last slide. On April 13, 2005, Oakland adopted Resolution 79235, outlining 4 principles. And these are critical. The 4 principles governing the community policing program of the city of Oakland is its purpose to reduce crime, enhance public safety, and improve the quality of life. It is a peer level, and let me underline that, a peer level partnership between the community, the police department, and other city agencies. In contrast to the 911 emergency response system, it addresses long-term chronic problems using proactive, collaborative problem-solving methods. And lastly, it fosters a geographically based crime prevention effort on 3 levels: at the block level, at the neighborhood level, and at the city level. And one of the things that the Resolution 79235 says, as you probably have noted, it talks clearly about the empowerment of neighborhoods. So that's the slideshow. Thanks again so much to Rania for her help in putting this together. It would have been impossible without her. We have Commissioner Harbin Forte. Hi, Brenda. So what do you think? I mean, the real point of this is a jump off point for our discussion around the 15-01 policy.
So I have a couple of questions and comments.
Kathy,
So
you're gonna,
who is this document prepared for? Us or the public or?
Kathy, can you repeat that? Because now we can hear you. Say that again, please. Go ahead, Kathy.
Okay, maybe I need to call.
Wow.
Okay, I'm gonna call in a minute and maybe I can talk over the phone because.
Yeah, I think you're gonna have to because you're breaking up real
Who
bad.
is this document prepared for? Us, the public? Who's the audience?
Who was the audience? Yeah, this was an audience, well, first prepared for the ad hoc, but it will go out to, it'll be on the website once it gets through the ad hoc. So other
Yes, I'm gonna call, let me call in. I'm gonna call in.
yeah, I think that would be better, Kathy. Please do that. Okay, other comments on the slideshow?
Yes, Commissioner Dorado, I thought it was.
Is there a number that I can call in on?
Rania, what would be the number?
Give me just a second.
I'll do that because I have a couple of questions. So I'll call.
Yeah, I'll try and email you the, I'll get those details to you privately.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rania. Go ahead, Wilson.
Yeah, I thought it was a good foundational document. Clearly, our focus is more at the end of that history than, you know, the early unrolling of police practices within the United States. But I think it's helpful in understanding what some of the elements and traces of that history are that are still having, in one way or another, impact right now. And I think it's also helpful in a contextual fashion, because what we're dealing with in terms of where Oakland is and urban communities in general, not just in regards to policing, but in regards to a lot of other things that are impacting our neighborhoods, and that, in a sense, police have been asked to respond to when they're not the proper agency to respond to them. So the issues that we are talking about in terms of what we're calling community policing or neighborhood councils, one of the unique aspects I think that Oakland has been striving towards is trying to impact on a lot of those other issues that the police are being asked to deal with when they're not the proper agency to deal with them, that then has an impact on the quality of life within our neighborhood. So I think it's contextually and important to lay these foundations as you have, Commissioner Dorado.
Thank you, Wilson. Any other commentary? You're muted.
Commissioner Creighton Davis's hand is up.
Okay. Go ahead, Creighton.
Hi, good afternoon. And I just want to follow up on Mr. Rouse's comment. One suggestion that I have just on the presentation is to add perhaps a little discussion on the origins of community policing as it relates to this commission that was established by President Lyndon B. Johnson. It was called the Katzenbach Commission. And that commission was, I think, in 1964 and 1965, and really created the ideological underpinning for community policing. And to Mr. Rouse's point, the idea behind community policing was really an expansion of law enforcement to address quality of life issues that were rampant in urban communities. And the commission looked at, a number of different quality life issues, such as nuisance, lack of, urban trash cleanup, small, low-level crime. And rather than identifying, municipal government-led responses or neighborhood-led responses, they opted for law enforcement as the kind of the silver bullet to address those issues. And that has created this broader scope for law enforcement to address issues that, to Mr. Rouse's point, is outside of perhaps their toolbox and skill set, but has also allowed for them to, participate in areas of life and areas of community life that we would hope for, that the community would kind of lead on. So that kind of look at that Katzenbach Commission provides another, ideological underpinning of why the scope has expanded, and then why we should think about other alternatives that are more community-led.
Thank you, Creighton. Other responses?
Mariano has his hand up.
Go ahead, Mariano.
Thank you. So, again, I think I mentioned this last week, there's our concern, not concern, but we should be looking at, why has it taken 20 or 25 years for us to even be discussing this when something already is set by this city. So, the suspicion is, is there a true buy-in by city administration? Is there a true buy-in by the local police? And, for the first time in all my 46 years here in the city of Oakland, I think I can safely say that I believe that because of the new chief and what he's trying to do is that there is some buy-in there. We just have to work it and make sure that it comes to fruition. But the city administration, the local city administration should be a larger concern, because imagine if the response or the reach out would have been to local policing established instead of going to the highway patrol, instead of increasing law enforcement to deal with this uptick in crime. Just imagine that if 25 years we would have had, all this already set in place. And so that's why I'm saying we're sliding back, looking at having MOUs with another law enforcement agency that has no accountability to us as a city and a jurisdiction. I would like us to address those, and also, put the metal to the pedal, because, this is a really important task, and you know, if we can address, you know, community policing as it was intended, and as we can reimagine it, you know, and be innovative with that, I think we can get places. But thank you for the slideshow, Commissioner Dorado.
Other commentary.
Kathy has her hand up.
Go ahead, Kathy.
I think that was from when she was on before.
Okay.
It
No, no.
remains up.
No, Commissioner's hand is up. She's also dialed in.
I'm trying to talk now.
Okay,
Okay,
we can
go.
hear you. Go ahead, Kathy.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. Yes. Kathy?
Okay, I guess it appears that my phone isn't working, so I'll just hope you guys hear me.
We can hear you
So I
now.
like this document. I just have a couple of comments. Where you talk about slave patrol and call people human beings, I think we should tell it like it is and say it was Black people who were actually enslaved. And I would also substitute the word slaves for enslaved.
Jose, I would agree with what Kathy has put forward. It's actually something that is developing within the African American community and discussions about the history of slavery. There's a real movement that has taken place to not refer to people as slaves, because it states as if it's a character of their being, but rather to refer to people as enslaved, so that
okay.
it's not a character of their being, it was something that was done to them. So
Yeah.
I think that's a distinction that's kind of growing, and it's probably one we should adopt.
Okay. Rania, we can easily make that change, correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. That'll be done. Thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Wilson. So any more commentary before we move on to the real substance
Yeah.
Yes.
of our discussion?
Okay,
Yes.
Magnus Sparrows has his hand up, and then I'll go after Mike.
Okay, go ahead, Mike.
Thank you, Jose. Thanks, Brenda. I don't know if this is the right time looking down the agenda of what's working, what's not working, and what are the problems. But one of the things that cannot be overlooked when we talk about community policing is the role of the unions, OPOA and the unions throughout the state, how they were able to create the Police Officers' Bill of Rights. That's a big segment of problems that we and any other community that wants to establish community policing are going to have to deal with, and they're kind of hidden, and you can't call them the administration, because they're not the administration. They're a far stronger force.
That's a great point, and I couldn't agree more. POBAR is such a problem, and we're definitely going to have to deal with it. So thank you, Mike. Brenda.
All right, thank you. I was going to suggest, I like the idea of trying to maybe put this on our website. I was going to suggest that perhaps we get Creighton and Wilson Rawls together and try to add some additional history. Maybe they have some suggestions for slides, for slide materials. If they could send that to you, Jose, or whatever, or if we kind of do a little subcommittee of the three of you and Kathy as well, or something, just sort of trying to supplement the slideshow. And I like going back, and I know that City Councilman Riles has a lot of history. He sent us some information on it. And so to the extent it wasn't already covered, and to the extent that we can go all the way back to Johnson's plan and movement, we ought to incorporate that into our slideshow, post it on the website, and that can stay there even when our ad hoc is done with. Just have it posted on the commission website, the history of community policing.
I think that's a great idea. Wilson, Kathy, you up for working on that?
And Creighton.
And Creighton?
Yeah, I'm willing to be a part of that.
Sounds
And it
good.
really is just supplementing. It may take only 3 or 4 more slides or so to get the point across, 5 or 7, maybe more, but at least we'll have a document.
Sure, happy to help.
Great.
And Kathy did also say yes in the chat.
Okay.
Excellent. Excellent.
I think Candace Elder has her hand up.
Go ahead, Candace.
Yes, I have a meeting logistics question. Is it appropriate time to ask it right now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I see that we have public attendees today, and 3 of which have their hand up. What is the procedure with the public in this committee?
Go ahead, Jesse.
First, we should probably promote Reginald Lyles to panelist.
Definitely.
Because he's part of the ad hoc.
Yes, definitely.
Yes. Is there anyone else there? And are we looking at the list of participants, or are we looking at? Okay, so we got Reggie. Is there anyone else, an ad hoc member who's in the waiting room or something?
Do you know if there's anybody in the waiting room, Rania, that's on the ad hoc?
There is no waiting room with this.
Okay.
So if they used, depending on the link that they would have used, they would have made it either to the panelists or attendees, but everyone that is on is on.
Okay. Well, back to Candace's question. Our thought in terms of the public, the greater community, was that they would they're more than welcome, obviously, to watch our meetings, but so that we could move along as we need to. We ask that they, if they're going to contribute, that they contribute to the chat, and we will make the effort to memorialize their comments on the chat, so that if in fact one, they have a question, that it gets answered, if not now, then later, and 2, if in fact they have a chat, a comment that really is relevant to our current discussion, that we keep an eye on that and bring that up. So we definitely want the greater public to not just see our participate in our meetings, but participate via the chat in those 2 ways.
So in line with that, I'll note that Aline Warren did state that what is missing in the slides and then the narrative described is the integration of women and ethnic minorities and the effect on community policing. And yes, and Mr. Reggie Lyles has a hand up. I think he also has a comment.
Thank you.
Okay.
And can I ask, if I can interrupt, I'm sorry, Kathy, can you take your hand down unless you are trying to speak, please? Kathy, do you have your hand up? It's been up all along. Can you lower it, please?
I can take it down now.
Okay, I'll lower it. Thank you for reminding me.
All right, no worries. Thank you. So just one hand up is Reggie Miles.
Hey,
Okay,
Reggie.
can everybody hear me?
We can hear you.
Now I know why I wasn't able to communicate. I wasn't educated. Okay, specifically what I want to speak to the PowerPoint you did. That's most of the information is all over internet. I've used it many times, so it has a foundational value to it, and across the United States, folks have agreed to all of that, stipulated to all of that what you've said. But we're right here in Oakland, and we have a history ourselves. So why are and I'm asking this facetiously, we need to talk about the Oakland history and why we need the community policing in Oakland. We have everything good and bad here in Oakland. So if we're going to talk about community policing, we don't need another example. We don't need to cite Detroit or Boston or Philadelphia or whatever. All we have to do is look at Oakland, and we can go back 100 years from slave patrols to, of course, there wasn't that kind of overt slavery here in Oakland, like in the South, but we do know that the recruitment of the Oakland Police Department, when the Great Migration came, were a recruitment of officers or police people, primarily white males, from the South to police this new, what they considered was invasion of Blacks coming into the community and an invasion of Asians coming into the community. Now, history is always hard. So we always, politicians always dance around the hard part of history. Why? Because it's hard, but the truth is the truth, and which is under assault right now. You all know that. So we ought to be really looking for the truth. So I say, let's look at Oakland's history vis-a-vis policing, starting from the exception of Oakland Police Department, starting to all of the issues we've had, of course, Black Panthers, the shootings, all of that we've had right here in the city of Oakland. And that should be reflective of it. Now, secondly, our number one problem is going to be, and I said it last week, and I'm hearing it again from Mr. Nesperos and Mr. Contreras, is that it's going to be the union. So we ought to face that right off the bat. And so what we tried to get into that last week was, what are the negative things that has prevented police oversight? Tell us what those negative things are. It's obvious. It's the police community in the department who won't adopt community oversight. So they're always at odds. So if we don't face it, if we act like it doesn't exist, we lose. We got to face that immediately. Immediate. So when we didn't get to what are the negative things last week, I thought we was going to start off with that this week. We didn't. Seem like we're dancing around it again. And some of us has been at this a long time. So we don't have to talk to us like we're, newbies at this. We ought to be able to just jump right in at the point of contention and then develop strategies and agreements and ameliorations so we can all move together. I'm not anti-police. I'm pro-police. I want good policing. We always got to say that. And I'll stop there.
Wilson Riles has his hand up.
Yeah, I just want to briefly add to what Reggie said, because I think it's very important. The first police officer to be killed in Oakland in the 1850s was killed by a Black man who was falsely accused of touching a white woman. The police officer burst into his home without announcing that he was a police officer And at that time, almost everybody carried a gun. And the black man killed the police officer. He was arrested, but then he was released because he hadn't touched the woman and the officer hadn't announced that he was a police officer. So this starts at the very beginning. The issue around race and the Oakland Police Department starts at the very beginning of the Oakland Police Department.
I'm shocked. So thank you, Reggie, and thank you, Wilson. The last thing I think we should be doing is dancing around hard issues. So given that, and Reggie's suggestion that we have a focus on policing here in Oakland, what do we want to do with that idea? Do we want to, assuming that they're willing to take it on, Wilson, Creighton, and Kathy, are they willing to? Do we want to ask them if they would either add to the current this slideshow or create a second either slideshow or document relating specifically to policing in Oakland? What do you think? Go ahead, Kathy.
I would say put it all in the same document. Or slide, sorry.
Okay. What do people think? And Wilson and Creighton, are you willing to work on supplementing or adding to, or improving, I should say, the slideshow from that perspective?
And I have a suggestion. So maybe the suggestion seems to me, the consensus is that we don't need to concentrate a lot in the slideshow about other history, perhaps only in passing. But that the focus of the slideshow really be on the history of community policing in Oakland. So perhaps it is to try to even maybe some of the slides that are there may not even be needed, maybe a substitution, and then spend the bulk of the slideshow talking about the history in Oakland. So that's one of the things I think that would make a lot of sense given what I'm hearing from Wilson and from Reggie, to spend more time to add more. So I also want to suggest that we not have two slideshows, one comprehensive slideshow, and it doesn't have to be 50 slides either. I think we should still try to keep it to 15, no more than 20 slides, but add the history, all of the stuff, all of the things that are important to Oakland, and only as background. This is where we're going. This is where we're starting. Basically, this is our knowledge base. And this is where, and so our ad hoc is going to move toward where community policing goes in the future in Oakland. And we'll strategize and come up with a policy that is about future actions. So that's my suggestion. One slideshow, some supplementation, maybe some of the earlier history in passing, maybe one line somewhere about Creighton's point about Johnson's thing, and then but more slides. And I know that Wilson has a lot of the history about Oakland, as does Reggie. More slides about in Oakland, sort of where we started from, and as a backdrop. Anyway, that was a long way of saying something.
We have a couple of
Thank you, Brenda.
As we say, to make a long story even longer. Okay. All right. Kathy has her hand up. Candace has her hand up. Reggie has his hand up. And I'm not sure who went first.
And Creighton also.
Yeah,
So
Candace
Creighton
has
as
had
well.
her hand up for a while, so I think
Okay.
it's Candace, Kathy, Reggie, and Creighton. In
Okay.
that order.
thank you, Jesse. Candace.
Yes, so I definitely agree that the history of policing in general, those are excellent slides, but they can be condensed and we can incorporate more of the history of Oakland policing included in the history, I think it might be good to also include statistics on the demographics of the police, because you can't talk about community policing and police bonding or in partnership with the communities that they're supposed to be serving if they're not from here. Knowing those numbers, the racial diversity, where are the officers living, age, things like that. And that's kind of some of the issues that we hear from the community is, my officer doesn't live here. My beat officer is not from here. They go home to, an hour, 2 hour drive, whatever, from here. So including some of that could look at equity issues and even recruitment, stats might be helpful.
Thank you, Candace. You're right on, spot on. Kathy.
I would agree with that as well. I'd also say that the reason that we're at the stage now with community policing is because of the history of the Oakland Police Department being brutal, not only on Black communities, but also on brown communities. Now, I'm thinking of the Brown Berets that were formed because of the Black Panthers. And the police came down on them too. So we should mention that too. Give the full story, as Reginald said. To leave out groups that have been harmed by the police is to ignore the pain that they have suffered. And I think we should be very inclusive. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Absolutely. Reggie.
Yeah, I'd ask the question, who is our audience for this document and of this presentation, and then ask the question, why are we doing it? I'm still confused about that. Quite frankly, I don't think we need it to do what we're doing. I think it's a nice to have, but I think it burdens us down and gets us away from the things that we ought to really be focusing in on. So this is a good thing to open up a meeting. If you're doing a community meeting and you're trying to get some cohesiveness, like if you walk into a church and the first thing that happens is a nice choir singing and we're all singing together, and to bring us together like that. But that's not where the real meat is. And here we're into our second meeting, maybe 50% through our second meeting, and we haven't even approached what were the negative things that prevent us from having a solid citizen oversight for over 20 years. Like Mr. Contreras says, why are we having that problem? And if we can start talking about that, we all know the history of Asians, Latinos, African Americans in this city vis-a-vis the police. We all know that OPD never want to hire any people of color. If you're not a white male from, Butte County, you're not number one on the list. And they have their own academy. So they're constantly, or they used to, weed out everybody that they wanted to weed out. So that's not, that's anecdotal. We can't ever get no hard evidence of it, except for the fact when you look back at, like the sister said, on the statistics. I mean, I know who gets hired at Oakland Police Department and who doesn't. And why, when we say Oakland Police Department says we're down on police officers, or have you heard this before? All of these good officers are leaving. I always used to say, let them go. Let's go down to the infirmary. Let's go to Fruitvale. These are great jobs. Don't tell me people can't do these jobs. I've traveled the world. I've seen African police officers. I've seen Colombian police officers. this is not a job that's just locused on white male from Sierra County or Butte County or whatever. I mean, let's just be serious about it. If we don't address that straight ahead, what we do is we get in this dance, and that's how the police union gets us distracted. So what are the negative things that prevented Oakland, the city of Oakland, to not have police oversight in the last 30 years?
That's a great question, and we're gonna hit that. Creighton.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Reggie, and my apologies if I call you Reggie.
No, it's fine. Everybody
Okay.
else.
Okay, thank you. I tend to agree with Reggie in terms of just how we want to focus our time. You know, the slideshow certainly could be an important resource, but my understanding is that, you know, our call is to update the policy, and we have the charge to actually update the policy. And it's fairly unilateral in nature, in that the police commission is endowed with a lot of authority to provide policy for OPD. And we should just focus on that effort, and definitely, you know, discussing what some of the, you know, historical or even present negative aspects will help inform how we draft that policy. But we gotta just work on drafting that policy, because we don't have too much time.
I certainly agree with that. So let's get one question answered, and that is that if Wilson, Creighton, Kathy, anybody else who wants to jump in, will go ahead and finish off that slideshow with the history of community policing and policing in Oakland. So if that's something that you guys will accept, then let's move right straight into Reggie's question. And that is, why has there not been any oversight of OPD? What are the negatives of policing and community policing in Oakland that resulted in there not being an Oakland Police Commission until 4 years ago? So, and how does that relate to our drafting a policy or putting together a product that we can then, to answer Reggie's other question, what we're focused on here is putting together a product that will then go to the police commission for their editing. And then once they're done with their editing, that product from the commission will go to the city council for their consideration and hopefully vote. So it's from us to the police commission, to the city council, and hopefully the adoption of a strong policy. Does that answer your question, Reggie?
Yeah, it doesn't answer the question, but it opens the question. And I think because there's a lot of facets. While I'm talking, I'll say this. In 1975, the city of Berkeley initiated Police Review Commission. I was there. Immediately, the rank and file, as an officer, immediately the rank and file started saying, this is the most evilest thing that ever happened. It's anti-police. It's horrible. Well, that was the first police review commission in the nation, and it worked. It worked so much that they put themselves out of business. It changed the culture of the Berkeley Police Department. And when they got subpoena power to order us to come and testify in front of them about what transpired in front of citizens, our behaviors changed. Now, when you look at the statistics, and I'm that kind of nerd, law enforcement statistics, the crime rate, homicide rate in Berkeley stayed just about the same. It bounced between 12 to 20, et cetera, but it didn't do any dramatic changing because we had a citizen oversight. In fact, what happened was citizens' complaints went down. And what happened was the civil payouts, civil judgments for police mispractice stopped. Why? Because officers knew that I would have to be drug in, have to testify. Ultimately, I could be civilly sued, and I'm trying to get my child through Catholic school and into college. right? So that changed our behavior. Didn't change the way we policed in terms of upholding the law, but all that extracurricular activity that that never occurred until we got the body cameras. Now we all know it occurs. All of that stopped. All of that. So what happened in the neighboring city, Oakland? Oakland said, we're never going to have this. And so they've armed themselves through their union, and they fight citizens, civilian oversight at every juncture, every front. They'll spend all their money to stop it. So that's what we're up against. Number two, citizen oversight will never work unless the whole department is in on it. The only way you get the whole department in on it is that every rank and file member in that department knows that if they want to promote, they want to go up the ranks, and that they have to be an advocate, not just a participant, but an advocate of police or citizen oversight. So if you're anti-citizen oversight, you can forget about being a sergeant or a detective. Oh, you can't do that. Yes, you can. You don't have the proper values. This is not the department's values. This is the city, the citizens of Oakland's values. So if you don't have the same values in line with the citizens in Oakland, we don't want you in charge of other officers who must have those same values. That's been tested in court. You can do it. You can do it. Just like you won't promote a guy who's a drunk, right? You don't promote a guy that's been involved in domestic violence, right? You say, well, if you don't like citizen oversight or community policing, then you must want to be a career police officer and not a sergeant, not a lieutenant, not a captain, not a deputy chief, not a chief. Many of them do. And that's what drives your department. It's kind of incentivization, but that's called good management.
That's why you're on this this ad hoc, to hear that from you, especially from your background. So I'm so glad you're articulating that. Follow-up
All right.
comment. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Mariano, I think, and then Kathy.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mariano.
Thank you. Yeah, so one of the resistances of what hasn't worked is the inclusion of race within community policing. I mean, this group here, what concerns us every day is our race, how we look, how we treated. Every day we get confronted, and we are concerned about that. And I think that's one of the things that we have to speak to, whether we can define it and whether it can be proven. One of the big failures of policing in general is that there is racial profiling. There is mistreatment of people of color by police. But a lot of times we say you can't prove that, so we cannot talk about that. We have to talk about that in community policing, because if we look at the conditions, if we're going to talk about the history of Oakland, we've got to talk about the conditions. And the present conditions in Oakland right now is that the OPOA has a narrative that says that it's the defund movement that's making this city unsafe. So that resistance, presents a counter narrative to what we're trying to do. The other thing is that we have to do is make sure that we define community policing in its most popular fashion, in its most popular definition, so that Senora Sanchez and Mrs. Johnson both understand and feel confident that this ad hoc, that this policy that gets developed is going to affect them. And not only those folks that have the ability and the means to participate in community policing. The Hills folks have every opportunity to participate in community policing, but the folks down in the flatlands don't. I mean, and they're the most affected. So we have to make sure that we define that in its most popular fashion so that we get the confidence in that. And so that means being as transparent and with community engagement as possible. So I really want to push that. All these meetings that we have, that they're as open to the public as possible, so that we don't come back in a month later and then we report out what we did. Folks see us as we're developing this. Thank you.
Thanks, Mariano. Who was next, Brenda?
Kathy, you've taken your hand down. Do you still want to speak? No, okay, so that was it. Kathy doesn't want to speak more.
Okay. So what Reggie laid it out as well he should. What do people think about the negative aspects of community policing, and specifically the role of OPOA and the OPD in general, resisting oversight, because that's certainly been the case. And how does that relate to how we can modify the policy to offset that? So what do people think about Reggie, the line of questioning by Reggie in those terms? What do people think we should focus on in terms of changing the culture, as he put it, which is exactly what we need to do? So anybody step up. Go ahead, Kathy.
So I'm not sure how much influence we have over the union. One of the problems is we need to pay attention when the MOU comes up again, because I remember when Kirkpatrick took office as the police chief, and the Coalition for Police Accountability met with her, and she agreed that the city had basically sold the citizens down the river with that MOU. So I'm not really sure what we can do in that instance. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Well, that's an interesting comment coming from former Chief Kirkpatrick. Did you have another comment? Because you still have your hand up, Kathy. If not,
no, I always forget to lower it. I'll lower it.
So what do people think about the obstructionism of OPOA in specific and OPD in general, and how can we offset that with this policy? How does that? What can we put on in the policy that not only addresses that obstructionism, but actually begins to change the culture of the department? And I think Reggie hit one of those ways right on the money, and that is in terms of promotions. Should we have in the policy some specific provisions that relate to the promotion of those people that are in fact upholding Oakland values? For example, the community resource officers. Should there be a provision in the policy that says that they should have a higher rate of pay, or that in fact that having being a CRO is in fact to be a factor in consideration of promotion? That is, it's an advantage over others who have not served as CROs. So what do people think of putting those provisions into the policy along those lines?
We have two hands, Mike and Creighton.
Mike, go ahead.
Thank you, Jose. I think it's good. I think it's necessary to be aware of the influence of OPOA and the leadership from back in the day, from the days of George Hart and on forward. I think it's good to know the history of how the first CPRB was formed after they had Burris do the investigation of that teenager who was shot in the back, and how the CPRB changed later to do open public hearings. But that's, just something, a couple paragraphs and then move on, because what we really want is to have a policy. I think that's what this committee, this ad hoc committee can do, is to create a policy regarding community policing. And it may include such things as citizens being a part of selection boards, citizens being a part of promotion boards, citizens being a part of everything that's important. And as you said, Jose, that having served as a community resource officer is 5 extra points towards the selection of a promotion or towards any benefit that's to be had. What we need to look for, I think, is the policies that we want to put forward and the performance objectives that will demonstrate whether or not those policies are being carried out.
Thank you, Mike. Creighton.
Yeah, I agree with Mike in terms of incentives, performance objectives. I don't know if folks had a chance to take a look at the 2-track document that was circulated in the packet, but perhaps that could be something that we refer to or use as a jumping off point to kind of solidify what our vision is, because my understanding is it is kind of narrow. We are focusing just on community policing policy, and while there are other things that influence that, we have to actually define what is our charge versus what is the broader charge of the police commission, which is not what we're focused on in this subcommittee or this ad hoc committee. So first, what is community oriented policing? What is community policing in Oakland as an OPD policy? Those are discussions and definitions and defined terms that we need to establish as a baseline for us to move forward. And I just think that I'm feeling a little lost right now in this conversation because there are a lot of different inputs coming in, and I not sure if there's any guidance that we can have in terms of just setting the parameter.
Wilson.
Yeah, I would echo what Creighton said. So I'm trying to differentiate what is the job and the responsibility of the commission versus the ad hoc committee that we are. And I would say ours is narrow, as Creighton had defined it. I think there is a lot of history around what the role that the Police Officers Association has played in the politics of the city. And some of why we are there is not necessarily the fault of the union, which is trying to and I'm not against having a union to represent police officer members. The question is that the leadership, political leadership of the city fell over and did whatever they asked to do rather than stand up and representing what was best for the residents of this community. And whatever you do with the union, you can't fault them totally for everything that was done. So I think the police commission has a role in dealing, it has the major role in dealing with what the Police Officers Association, what power they have within the police department. I mean, at one point, everybody in the department was a member of either the Police Officers Union or another union. The only person who wasn't was the chief. And so the union call the shots, and the chief had almost no power. So there's a history there that we're trying to work our way out of. But I don't know if the ad hoc committee is the one or the group that needs to figure out how to do that and get a better balance of power and representation of the people of Oakland and their needs and their wants within the police. But I think we do have a responsibility around this particular part around community policing. And I would like to put on the table of this ad hoc group another place where we've fallen down, and that is that we also have civilian employees who are working on the community policing that have totally fallen down in their responsibilities for organizing the neighborhoods and the block groups and making it inclusive and getting the organization focused on what the intent was. And that has not been done. And I think that's going to need to be done if we're really going to have the kind of power in the neighborhoods for directing the quality of life and what's going on within the neighborhoods, which is, I think, what we want to have done with the community policing approach, whatever you call it, because I agree, Jose, that I think we should change the name because it's become difficult, confusing, because of what people expect because of the name.
Thank you, Wilson. Kathy.
So I have more of a question about just the CROs, but policy 15-01 also talks about foot patrol officers and crime reduction officers. How do they factor in with this policy that we're creating or supplementing or amending?
I'm sorry, Kathy, you broke up toward the middle. Can you say that again?
Well, I'm just saying that we're focusing mostly on CROs, but what about patrollers and CRPs who are also included in policy 15-01?
I heard her. Maybe I could
go ahead, Justin.
say what she said. Kathy mentioned that the discussion is mainly focused on CROs, but the policy still seems to also mention foot patrols and crime reduction teams. To what extent are we focusing on them, or to what extent are they going to be included in the policy? Does that sound right, Kathy?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, great. That's a good question. We have, as I see it, we have we can throw out any reference to foot patrols that we don't think they relate effectively to the concept that we want to promote. And that goes for crime reduction teams as well. I don't see, and I'll just speak for myself, I don't see any barrier to our saying as an ad hoc, look, we don't think this relates directly to what community policing or whatever title we want to put on it. So we're just going to eliminate that whole section that relates to foot patrols and CRTs. We have that, as far as I'm concerned, we have that liberty. And just as an aside, while I couldn't agree with Wilson more about the civilians, the neighborhood services coordinators, not doing their job even close to what their job description says. We have to remember that now they've been moved to the city administrator. So part and parcel of our thinking has to be that how are we going to see to it that in fact they do their job even though they're under the city administrator, Ed Riskin. And my answer to that would be, if in fact we make sure that this policy is solid enough that there is the kind of grassroots or community organizing that should have been done a long time ago, then that will provide a power base for making sure that the city administrator does his job to make sure that the neighborhood services coordinators finally do their job. So Brenda, and then Reggie.
Thank you. Two things. One, I want to note a comment in the chat from Elise Bernstein. Says, yes, CROs should receive some advantages for their specific individual responsibilities. Their work should allow for extra credit towards any promotion or benefit. Reward the good work, reward good work of good officers in a tangible way. So that was number one. Number two is, I note that it's 3:22 at 3:23, so we've been going about an hour and a half or so, close to an hour and a half. I'm wondering if maybe we ought not to specifically look at the policy to see what it is we are supposed to be revising and sort of use that as a starting point for trying to figure out which provisions we should delete, which provisions we should, keep, revise, whatever, so that we can start getting to the meat of the policy that we're going to eventually have to come up with, and then kind of throw things in and put suggestions in as we discuss the specific policy. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Brenda. Reggie.
I just want to caution us not to, and I guess it sounds like it already has occurred, not to end up with two Oakland police departments. Because if you do, you're going to have them pitted against each other, and the dominant one always wins. And it wins where? Budget. It wins when assignment comes. It has the ranking officers who can reassign people because of attrition, in the ranks. So you lose. The great enemy to community policing is when you have the dominant police department thinking that this community policing is the other. And long as they think it's the other, they won't make it work. They won't help it. They'll just do it on paper, but it will not come functionally. Now, community policing is effective when somebody from the community can say, we have a problem. It is not a serious crime problem, but it's a great annoyance to all of us. We need some help out here. Can you bring your creative people here to look at this problem, which may include, the garbage, refuge cleanup, rat abatement, some tow yard, and some police officers in uniform who can make some arrests. You never want to give up that part. What OPD has done, or what Oakland, what I've observed them in doing in their community policing, they always keep patrol to themselves. And then you get all of that administrative stuff. So then what do you have to do? You try to go out there and talk to somebody about this community annoyance. And, they get the vapors and start flexing their muscle, start calling you a bunch of names, blah, 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 blah. You say, wait a minute, you want to back down. Then you call the police department, and then who are you calling? Patrol, who doesn't want you to be successful in the first place. So they don't refuse to respond. They just slow walk you to death. We're on our way. We're coming. We'll be there. We're busy. And so you realize you have no power. It's just titular. So, I always thought that community policing should be locused in patrol. in that the people who talk to patrol are these community resource officers, and they're respected. And if you don't listen to them, then maybe I need to remove you from your assignment. Maybe I need to discipline you for not listening to Jose Donato and his problem. Or tell me, what have you done about that problem? And then you give me a bunch of gobbledygook, and I hear this all the time from you. You're not the guy that should be here. So I'm moving you out. The person who gets here is the person who wants to work and get the job done, but they have to have some power. And that power is locust in patrol. We're talking about policing. Unless you're going to ask bad guys not to be so bad. It's never worked for me. When I was in law, you ask them, and if they're committed to doing what they're doing, they don't hear you. You need some backup. Now, they've moved those community resource officers into the city attorney's office. How's that going to play out on the street? When somebody got 3 pit bulls and scaring your children half to death, and you can't get animal control to respond. So you call the police, and the police tell you to call animal control tell you to call the police, and nothing happens. That's the daily life in Oakland. That's where effectiveness falls down. Last point. The Hills resident, and I'm not against them, but they have community policing. They have it. It's called Neighborhood Network. It's called the police union. They have, when they complain about something, they get a response. And that response could be anywhere from some administrative civil response to police to some ranking officer coming out. So OPD works for them quite well. And that's what we want replicated in the communities that don't have it. And I don't have to tell you where those communities are. You guys all know this. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me. And certainly that's exactly what we have to do, is build that power block by block in our communities that need it the most. They don't need community policing as much as in the Hills as much as they need it in Deep East or in West Oakland. So what I'm hoping that we do is come up with a policy that mandates the kind of grassroots block by block community organizing that needs to happen to build that power, so that in fact we get the attention of City Hall and OPD and anybody else that can address a problem that we bring to their attention. So
the issue for us at Allen Temple was this: if we call them, will they come? And I would say they show up maybe 55% of the time, maybe. We had guys coming stealing tires off of cars on Sunday morning around 8:30, 9 o'clock in the middle of the first service, stealing tires off of cars parked around there. And we had people who were walking the block, and with their little signs on saying Allen Temple Security, saying, hey, don't steal the cars. And they just looked at them and said, with a crowbar in their hand. It said, we're taking these tires. So we go 911, nothing. Now, I'm not telling you something that's in the top of my head. I can tell you the name of the person who got a car's tires, set of tires ripped off twice. She's a physician. She said, man, look, let them have it. OPD never showed up. And that's the problem we're dealing with.
Go ahead, Mariano.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I'm ready
Okay.
for an assignment. I'm ready to be assigned something to do here. You know, look at the definition of community policing, its application, local conditions. I'm ready. Who's gonna break us up? There's 12 of us here. These are really good foundational discussions, but we can't do this next time again. We need to have some kind of working document beginning. So community policing, you know, it's been defined in several ways, but the most one that makes sense to me, it says that it addresses the immediate conditions that affect public safety issues. So let's take that and let's go with it. So like I said, I'm ready for an assignment. So let's go. And it's 3:33.
Okay, Creighton has his hand up, but let's go with that and then let's talk about assignments.
I'm all for assignments as well. You know, going along with Commissioner Harbin Forte's point, I think we do need to look at, you know, what the existing policy states, but I think we should really challenge ourselves to imagine, you know, something beyond that policy as well. You know, that policy is narrow in terms of, you know, what the historical approach should be, has been, but I think we should really challenge ourselves to think about, you know, what does community-oriented policing mean in terms of relationships between officers and the community? How do we structure that? How do we actually make it a practice and a procedure? How do we incentivize it, create performance metrics as Mike mentioned? And how do we make it actually measurable so that there's no wiggle room, so that, you know, everybody's clear from OPD and the community? And then how do we actually invest and empower our neighborhoods so that they are equipped with the resources, the understanding, the training to impact issues, but also get help when there are issues that that neighbors can't impact? And you know, the CPAB, of which I'm chair, is really focusing on that approach instead of community policing for our neighborhoods, one that is based in neighborhood empowerment. And that's something that I mentioned last time, because at the end of the day, you know, it's not OPD or any city administrator or city agency that's living in the community. It's the neighbors, it's the residents, and they need to be able to have the resources, the know-how, the training to be able to impact issues. And that's not a community policing framework. That's a neighborhood empowerment framework. That is a neighborhood resource community engagement framework. And that's what we're working on to implement, and diverting away from this model of community policing for our neighborhoods. Because at the end of the day, when people hear community policing at the neighborhood level, they don't want to get involved, because that's offensive, that's traumatic, there's negative connotations. So how do we get people involved and empower them with the resources and skills and the training to mediate disputes and to resolve issues, and to get help when help is needed, and help that might not necessarily mean OPD.
Thank you, Creighton. So go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Brenda.
Hi there. And I agree with Creighton. It may be that the policy looks nothing like what the current one is, but that's where we start. It's going to be 15-01. We can start with changing the name, not community policing, community-oriented problem solving, whatever it is we do. So what we finally end up with may look like nothing, and it will certainly be worlds apart from the current policy. And I think that we have to start there. So it's now 1501. Every line in 1501 may well end up coming out in terms of the final product. But my suggestion is that we start there. And again, with the name change, for one thing, is probably the first thing we'll do. We're going to define what our vision is, what we believe community policing is all about. Community-oriented problem solving should be about. But there are some provisions and subject matters and stuff in the current policy that we take, we embellish, we transform it, we do whatever we want so that we can end up with the ideal policy 15-01. And so that's what I'm suggesting that we do. We start there. We may tear apart every sentence in there, or we may take the concept, this section that we have on something else, it may look totally different from what's there now. And it should look totally different, because I think we all agree that what's there now is simply not working, and we can embellish it, we can change it, we can refocus everything that's in that policy, and we can do what's needed for the city of Oakland and come up with a workable vision, workable plan for whatever we call it, community-based problem solving, or whatever we call our new policy. I think we all agree that it should not be community policing, or the word policing should not be in the policy at all.
I think that that sounds good to me. Reggie.
I think my hand was just up. I'll
Okay.
lower it.
All right, we're at, I got 3:38. Let me throw this out. We're agreed on the modification of the slideshow. That's already settled. Let's look at the 15-01 policy as it is now, and let's just tear it up. Let's just tear it apart and put it in a form that we think is something that we want to see. And Brenda and Jesse, we just have them send it to us, and we just compile these thoughts. But let's look at it that way, that we're just gonna tear into the policy and tear it up and make it something that we want to see. And let's just all do that together. And while we're doing that, see if in fact we should, as a group, begin to separate into subcommittees and we can decide that at our next meeting. But for now, let's see what we all come up with in terms of tearing into this policy and making it something that we want to see, addressing all these great points that have been brought up today. How does that sound?
Chair, two hands. I believe Rania has a hand up, and then Creighton.
Rania.
I do. Oh, I will just share very quickly if this is helpful. And I texted you, Commissioner Dorado. Perhaps I can get hold of you, commissioners, either after or at some time. I share, it would be just as a thought. My name is. You might want to consider looking at best practice. So other policies around the country or even internationally, and it doesn't have to necessarily be police jurisdictions, but anything that you do like, that sometimes helps emulate. You might also want to consider, and commissioners, this is where I would want to work with you, some kind of organizing structure, because there are so many of you on the panel in this ad hoc and the public. And of course, we haven't brought the police department in yet, although there was a lieutenant on. Some structure, some kind of documentation to help track so that you make your case when you get to the commission for I am premature here, but much further down the line, you'll be asked, you'll want to explain to the commissioners how you got to this and to the public that haven't been able to engage with you. So I just share some framework ideas as you guys start moving on this, because you can see that there's passion and energy in slightly different areas, and just being able to compile all of that is going to be really important when you actually get into line edits, concepts, new philosophies, and some trends around community policing.
Great. I certainly agree with seeing if we can apply a structure and a framework so that we can organize our thoughts as they start coming in. So again, going back to the idea of everyone submitting their thoughts, tearing into this policy, putting it in the form that we think it should be, and submitting that to Commissioners Harbin Forte and Shay and myself. So we begin to compile it, and with Rania's help, put it in some sort of a structure, put a framework on it, and then spit it back out so that people have a chance to look at what everybody else is thinking. And we can certainly do that over the next 2 weeks, I would think. And, we can talk as a part of it's okay with everybody, talk next meeting about our splitting off into subcommittees after we've gone through this process. So how does that sound? Sound good?
Chair, I tend to see agreement and thumbs up. and nods of the head. May I also suggest that as people are considering edits, additions, or deletions to the policy, that you also give us your thoughts, excuse me, on what this thing that we're working on, whether it's community policing, community problem solving, whatever it is, what we call it, as well as what we think the vision of it should be. And that might help guide what exactly those line edits or tear outs would be, and sort of move us towards getting to those, to the nitty gritty details. I'll shut up now, and I see Creighton's hand up.
Thank you, Jesse. Creighton.
And I think those, just kind of thinking about those high level points is important, because as we look through the policy, like, of course, there will be line things that, you know, are offensive or are maybe not vibe with, you know, our own perception on how community policing are, but we should think maybe high level ideas first. And, you know, don't want to keep plugging the document that I drafted, but maybe that's something that I can present, or we could discuss in our next meeting, just because there is at least a framework. And I think it's very helpful for us to think about what are our goals for this policy? What are the top line goals? Like, what do we want this community oriented or community policing policy to be? 1, 2, 3, 4, and then kind of backwards plan from that. That's my teacher hat coming on, but backwards plan from that into then the details. So starting off at the high level goals, high level objectives of what, how we think this relationship or this policy would look like, and then kind of further boiling it down to see, okay, are the details that exist in the current policy, do they vibe with these objectives? If not, then cross them out and put something else in. But I think we need some unison on, you know, what is our overarching objective and high level goals.
Well said. I think it's exactly the kind of approach we should take. Any other thoughts or suggestions before we wrap this up? But I'm excited about seeing what kind of thoughts are going to be coming in, particularly these. I think it's a good point by Creighton to come to some sort of consensus about these high level ideas and what are our goals. I think that's really the way to do things, and we can go from there to the specific edits on a line by line basis.
Brenda?
Yes, thank you. I was going to say, should Creighton send us his document so that we have it, if he hasn't already, just send it to all of us so that we can look at that model and have it in mind as we suggest changes to 15-01. Also, as an aside, but if we do community-oriented problem solving, the acronym is going to be COPS. Just thought I'd throw that out there. Just thought I'd throw that out there. Anyway,
Better. Thank you for the thought.
Yeah, we will definitely make sure that everybody gets a copy of Creighton's document. That was I dropped that ball. I thought that I had sent that out to everybody. It's certainly a part of the packet that is on our on the Police Commission website right now, along with everything else, the 15-01, et cetera. In any case, I'll make sure that that gets out to everybody, because that'll, you know, that's an important set of thoughts.
And if it is there, then it doesn't need to be reset. I thought Creighton was referring to something that we didn't have. So, all right, thank you.
All righty. So go ahead, Mariano.
I just wanted to ask if that document included application. And if it doesn't, you know, that's something along with Commissioner Shea's suggestion about, you know, vision, is that we also maybe include application. Let's assume that we're going to come out with a really incredible document policy. How are we going to make sure that it gets implemented properly? So that's just another point that I'd like to alert people on. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, What's that saying, Reggie? Culture eats policy for lunch.
It's a
So
good one.
we need to make sure that it gets implemented, not just words on a page. So,
Can you clarify the document that you're referring to? Is it your notes on the policy, the current policy?
Creighton?
To me, Candace, sorry. Yeah, so it was last meeting, we had talked about a two-track approach. So I'd spoken with Jose, and he suggested that I just send around just a framework for that approach. And the framework that I sent around is just high level, rationale as to why a two-track approach might be helpful, and then certain objectives that might be included in the two-track approach of community-oriented policing on one hand and neighborhood empowerment on the other. So the purpose of the document was for it to spur discussion on the high-level topics, but also to create a framework for that discussion to occur. So that was the idea on my end.
Thank you, Creighton. Did that answer your question, Candace?
Yes, and we do not have that document yet, right? You will send it.
I definitely make sure that everybody has it.
Okay, thank you.
I'll do
Okay.
a couple.
It was among the documents that was in your email, Jose. You listed with the agenda and all. It was one of those that was there.
Okay. I'll send it out again just to make sure absolutely everybody has it. Because it is really important. If there's no other final thoughts or suggestions, I think we can call it a meeting. And again, we're really excited about seeing what kind of thoughts will be coming our way that we can then begin to compile, start putting together, and really starting to get this policy where it should be. So if there, Brenda and Jesse have anything, okay.
Just a confirmation of the next meeting date. It's going to be August 28th, is it?
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
And what time?
We're gonna say with 2 p.m.
2 p.m. Okay.
Is that still good with everybody? Okay,
Said August 28th.
yes. So again, thank you all from Jesse and Brenda for taking the time to taking a big piece of your Saturday afternoon to help us do this work. But I'm confident that we're confident that it's going to be well worth it. So again, we're all excited about, looking forward to the thoughts that are going to come down the line.
We'll follow you anywhere, Jose. We're happy to be. We're just honored to be in your presence.
Oh my God. Oh.
And in the presence of all of these esteemed members of this ad hoc.
We're really
enjoying it.
We're really blessed. We really are to have this group with us. So we appreciate you all. I can't express that enough. And Rania, thank you so much for shepherding this meeting. We really appreciate it. So if there's nothing else, without any further ado, I'm going to say that this meeting is adjourned. Buenas tardes todos, and take care of yourself. Be safe.
Great, you have a cold one for me.
Delta variant is gone
Have a
crazy.
good Saturday.
Bye, everybody.
Take care.
Rhonda, can you stay on for just 1 sec?
Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay.
Let's see, let's turn off recording.